Paradise Lost, Book 6.
All night the dreadless angel, unpursued through heaven's wide champaign, held his way till morn, waked by the circling hours, with rosy hand unbarred the gates of light. There is a cave within the mound of God, fast by his throne, where light and darkness in perpetual round lodge and dislodge by turns, which makes through heaven graceful vicissitude, like day and night. Light issues forth, and at the other door obsequious darkness enters, till her hour to veil the heaven through darkness there might well seem twilight here. And now went forth the morn, such as in highest heaven, arrayed in gold imperial from before her vanished night, shot through with orient beams when all the plain, covered with thick embattled squadrons bright, chariots and flaming armies and fiery steeds, reflecting blaze on blaze, first met his view. War, he perceived, war in procinct, and found already known for what news he had thought to have reported. Gladly then he mixed among those friendly powers who him received, with joy and acclamations loud, that one of so many myriads fallen, yet one returned, not lost. Onto the sacred hill they led him high applauded, and present before the seat supreme, from whence a voice, from midst a golden cloud, thus mild was heard.
Servant of God, well done. Well hast thou fought the better fight, who single hast maintained against the revolted multitudes the cause of truth, in word mightier than they in armies, and for the testimony of truth hast borne universal approach. Far worse to bear than violence, for this was all thy care, to stand approved in sight of God, through worlds judge thee perverse. The easier conquest now remains thee, aided by this host of friends, back on thy foes, more glorious to return than second thou didst depart, and to subdue by force who reason for their law refuse, right reason for their law, and for their King Messiah, who by right merits reigns. Go, Michael of celestial armies, prince, and thou in military prowess next, Gabriel, lead forth to battle these my sons invincible. Lead forth my armed saints, by thousands and by millions ranged for fight, equal in number to that godless crew rebellious, them with fire and hostile arms, fearless assault, and to the brow of heaven pursuing, drive them out from God and bliss into their place of punishment, the gulf of Tartarus, which ready opens wide his fiery chaos to receive their fall.
So spake the sovereign voice, and clouds began to darken all the hill, and smoke to rowl in dusky wreaths, reluctant flames, the sign of wrath awaked. Nor with less dread the loud ethereal trumpet from on high gan blow, at which command the powers militant that stood for heaven in mighty quadrate joined, of union irresistible, moved on in silence to their bright legions, to the sound of instrumental harmony that breathed heroic ardour to the adventurous deeds, under their godlike leaders, in the cause of God and his Messiah. On they move, indissolubly firm, no obvious hill, nor straightening vale, nor wood, nor stream divides their perfect ranks, for high above the ground their march was, and the passive air upbore their nimble tread, as when the total kind of birds in orderly array on wing came summoned over even to receive their names of thee. So over many a tract of heaven they marched, and many a province wide, tenfold the length of this terrene. At last, far in the horizon to the north appeared, from skirt to skirt, a fiery region stretched in battalious aspect. A nearer view bristled with upright beams innumerable, of rigid spears and helmets thronged, and shields various with boastful argument portrayed. The banded powers of Satan hasting on with furious expedition, for they weened that same day by fight or by surprise to win the mound of God, and on his throne to set the envier of his state, the proud aspirer. But their thoughts proved fond and vain. In the midway, though strange to us it seemed at first, that angels should with angel war, and in fierce hosting meet who want to meet so oft in festivals of joy and love, unanimous as sons of one great sire, hymning the eternal Father. But the shout of battle now began, and rushing sound of onset ended soon each milder thought. High in the mist exalted as a god, the apostate In his sun-bright chariot sate idol of majesty divine, enclosed with flaming cherubim and golden shields, then lighted from his gorgeous throne. For now, twixt host and host that narrow space was left, a dreadful interval, and front to front presented stood in terrible array of hideous length, before the cloudy van on the rough edge of battle ere it joined. Satan with vast and haughty strides advanced, came towering, armed in adamant and gold. Abdiel, that sight endured not where he stood, among the mightiest bent on highest deeds, and thus his own undaunted heart explores.
O heaven, that such resemblance of the highest should yet remain, where faith and reality remain not. Wherefore should not strength and might there fail, where virtue fails, or weakest prove where boldest? Though to sight unconquerable, his puissance trusting in the Almighty's aid, I mean to try, whose reason I have tried, unsound and false, nor is it aught but just that he who in debate of truth hath won, should win in arms, in both disputes alike victor, though brutish and contest and foul when reason hath to deal with force, yet so most reason is that reason overcome.
So pondering, and from his armed peers forth stepping opposite, halfway he met his daring foe, at this prevention more incensed, and thus securely him defied.
Proud art thou met, thy hope was to have reached the height of thy aspiring unopposed, the throne of God unguarded and his side, abandoned at the terror of thy power, or potent tongue, fool not to think how vain against the omnipotent to rise in arms, who out of smallest things could without end have raised incessant armies to defeat thy folly, or with solitaire hand reaching beyond all limit at one blow, unaided could have finished thee, and whelmed thy legions under darkness, but thou seest all are not of thy train. There be who faith prefer, and piety to God, that when to thee not visible, when I alone seemed in thy world erroneous to dissent from all, my sect thou seest, now learn too late how few sometimes may know, when thousands err.
Whom the grand foe with scornful eye askance thus answered.
Ill for thee, but in which hour of my revenge first sought for thou returns from flight, seditious angel, to receive thy merited reward, the first to say of this right hand provoked, since first that tongue, inspired with contradiction, dust opposed a third part of the gods, in synod met their deities to assert, who while they feel vigour divine within them, can allow omnipotence to none. But well thou comest before thy fellows, ambitious to win from me some plume, that thy successes may show destruction to the rest. This pause between, unanswered least thou boast, to let thee know. At first I thought that liberty and heaven to heavenly souls had been all one, but now I see that most through sloth had rather serve, ministering spirits trained up in feast and song. Such hast thou armed the minstrelsy of heaven, civility and freedom to contend, as both their deeds compared this day shall prove.
To whom in brief thus Abdiel stern replied.
Apostat, still thou errst, nor end wilt find of erring. From the path of true remote, unjustly thou depravest it with the name of servitude, to serve whom God ordains, or nature, God and nature bid the same, when he who rules is worthiest and excels. Them whom he governs, this is servitude, to serve the unwise, or him who hath rebelled against his worthier, as thine now serve thee. Thyself not free, but to thyself enthralled, yet lewdly darest our ministering upbraid. Reign thou in hell my kingdom. Let me serve in heaven God ever blessed, and his divine behests obey, worthiest to be obeyed, yet chains in hell, not realms expect. Meanwhile, from me returned, as erst thou saidst from flight, this greeting on thy impious crest receive.
So saying, a noble stroke he lifted high, which hung not, but so swift with tempest fell on the proud crest of Satan, that no sight nor motion of swift thought less could be his shield, such ruin intercept. 10 paces huge he back recoiled, the 10th on bended knee, his massive spear upstayed as if on earth, winds underground of waters forcing way sidelong, had pushed a mountain from his seat, half sunk with all his pines. Amazement seized the rebel thrones, but greater rage to see thus foiled their mightiest. Our joys filled and shout, presage of victory and fierce desire of battle. Whereas Michael bid sound the archangel trumpet, through the vast of heaven it sounded, and the faithful armies rung Hosanna to the highest, nor stood at gaze the adverse legions, nor less hideous joined the horrid shock. Now storming fury rose, and clamour such as heard in heaven till now was never. Arms on armour clashed, brayed horrible discord, and the madding wheels of brazen chariots raged. Dire was the noise of conflict. Overhead the dismal hiss of fiery darts in flaming voiles flew, and flying vaulted are the host with fire. So under fair cope together rushed both battles main, with ruinous assault and inextinguishable rage. All heaven responded, and had earth been then, all earth had to her centre shook. What wonder, when millions of fierce encountering angels fought, on either side, the least of whom could wield these elements, and arm him with the force of all their regions. How much more of power, army against army, numberless, to raise dreadful combustion, warring and disturb, though not destroy, their happy native seat. Had not the eternal King, omnipotent from his stronghold of heaven, high overruled and limited their might, though numbered such as each divided legion might have seemed, a numerous host, in strength each armed band, a legion led in fight, yet leader seemed each warrior single as in chief, expert when to advance, or stand, or turn the sway of battle, open when and when to close, the images of grim war, no thought of flight, none of retreat, no unbecoming deed that argued fear, each on himself veiled, as onely in his arm the moment lay of victory. Deeds of eternal fame were done, but infinite, for wide was spread that war and various, sometimes on firm ground a standing fight, then soaring on main wing tormented all the air. All air seems then conflicting fire. Long time in even scale the battle hung, till Satan, who that day prodigious power had shown, and met in armies no equal, ranging through the dire attack of fighting seraphim confused, at length saw where the sword of Michael smote, and felled squadrons at once with huge two-handed sway. Brandished aloft the horrid edge came down, wide wasting, such destruction to withstand. He hasted and opposed the rocky orb of tenfold adamant, his ample shield of vast circumference. At his approach the great archangel from his warlike toil surceased, and glad as hoping here to end intestine war in heaven, the archfoe subdued or captive dragged in chains, with hostile frown and visage all inflamed, first thus began.
Author of evil, unknown till thy revolt, unnamed in heaven, now plenteous, and thou seest the acts of hateful strife, hateful to all, though heaviest by just measure of thyself and thy adherents. How hast thou disturbed heaven's blessed peace, and into nature brought misery, uncreated till the crime of thy rebellion? How hast thou instilled thy malice into thousands, once upright and faithful, now proved false, but think not here to trouble holy rest. Heaven cast thee out from all her confines. Heaven the seat of blissful brooks, not the works of violence and were. Hence then, an evil go with thee along, thy offspring to the place of evil. Hell, thou and thy wicked crew, their mingled broils ere this avenging sword begin thy doom, or some more sudden vengeance winged from God precipitate thee with augmented pain.
So spake the Prince of Angels, to whom thus the adversary.
Nor think thou with wind of airy threats to awe whom yet with deeds thou canst not. Hast thou turned the least of these to flight, or if to fall, but that they rise unvanquished, easier to transact with me, that thou shouldst hope imperilous, and with threats to chase me hence? Ere not that so shall end the strife which thou call'st evil, but we style the strife of glory, which we mean to win, or turn this heaven itself into the hell thou fablest, here however to dwell free, if not to reign. Meanwhile thy utmost force, and join him named Almighty to thy aid. I fly not, but have sought thee far and nigh.
They ended parley, and both addressed for fight unspeakable. For who, though with the tongue of angels can relate, or to what things lycon on earth conspicuous, that may lift the human imagination to such height of godlike power? For like as gods they seemed. Stood they, or moved in stature, motion, arms fit to decide the empire of great heaven. Now waved their fiery swords, and in the air made horrid circles. Two broad suns their shields blazed opposite, while expectation stood in horror. From each hand with speed retired, west erst was thickest fight, the angelic throng left large field, unsafe within the winds of such commotion, such as to set forth great things by small. If nature's concord broke, among the constellations war was sprung. Two planets rushing from a aspect malign of fiercest opposition in mid-sky should combat, and their jarring spheres confound. Together, both with next to almighty arm, uplifted imminent, one stroke they aimed that might determine, and not need repeat, as not of power at once, nor odds appeared in smite or swift prevention. But the sword of Michael from the armoury of God was given to him tempered so, that neither keen nor solid might resist that edge. It met the sword of Satan with swift force to smite descending, and cut half sheer, nor stayed, but with swift wheel reverse, deep entering all his right side. Then Satan first knew pain, and wired him to and fro convolved. So sore the grinding sword with discontinuous wound passed through him, but ethereal substance closed, not long divisible, and from the gash a stream of nectarous humour issuing flowed sanguine, such as celestial spirits may bleed, and all his armour stained, while so bright. Forthwith, on all sides to his aid was run, by angels many and strong, who interposed defence, while others bore him on their shields back to his chariot, where it stood retired from the flies of war. There they laid him, gnashing for anguish and despite and shame, to find himself not matchless, and his pride humbled by such rebuke, so far beneath his confidence to equal God in power. Yet soon he healed, for spirits that live throughout, vital in every part, not as frail man in entails, heart or head, liver or reins, cannot but by annihilation die, nor in their liquid texture mortal wound receive. No more can the fluid air. All heart they live, all head, all eye or ear, all intellect or sense, and as they please they limn themselves, and colour, shape or size assume, and likes them best, condense or rare. Meanwhile, in other parts, like deeds deserve memorial, where the might of Gabriel fought, and where the fierce ensigns pierced the deep array of Moloch, furious king, who defied at his chariot wheels to drag him bound, threatened, nor from the Holy One of Heaven refrained his tongue blasphemous, but anon, down cloven to the waist, with shattered arms and uncouth pain, fled, bellowing. On each wing, Uriel and Raphael, his vaulting foe, through huge and in a rock of diamond armed, vanquished Adramelech and Asmodee, two potent thrones that, to be less than gods, disdained, but meaner thoughts learned in their flight, mangled with ghastly wounds through plate and mail, nor stood unmindful Abdiel to annoy the atheist crew, but with redoubled blow, Ariel and Arioch, and the violence of Ramael scorched and blasted overthrew. I might relate thousands, and their names eternalize here on earth, but those elect angels, content with their fame in heaven, seek not the praise of men, and the other sought in might through wonder and acts of war, nor renown less eager, yet by doom cancelled from heaven and sacred memory. Nevertheless, in dark oblivion let them dwell. For strength from truth divided, and from just, illaudable, naught merits, and dispraise and ignominy, yet to glory aspires, vain glorious, and through infamy seeks fame. Therefore eternal silence be their doom. And now their mightiest quelled, the battle swerved, with many an inroad gored, entered and foul disorder, with shivered armour strewn, and on a hip chariot and charioteer lay overturned, and fiery foaming steeds. What stood recoiled or wearied, though the faint satanic host defensive scarce, or with a pale fear surprised, then first with fear surprised and a sense of pain fled ignominious, to such evil brought by sin of disobedience till that hour, not liable to fear or flight or pain, far otherwise the inviolable saints in cubic phalanx, firm advanced entire, invulnerable, impenetrably armed. Such high advantages their innocent gave them above their foes, not to have sinned, not to have disobeyed. Flight they stood, unwearied, unobnoxious to be pained by wound, who from their place of violence moved.
Now night her course began, and over heaven inducing darkness, grateful truths imposed, and silence on the odious din of war. Under her cloud convert both retired, victor and vanquished. On the foughten field, Michael and his angels prevalent encamping, placed in guard their watches round, cherubic waving fires. On the other part, Satan and his rebellious disappeared, far in the dark dislodged and voice of rest, his potentates to council called by night, and in the midst thus undismayed began.
Oh, now in danger tried, now known in arms not to be overpowered, companions dear, found worthy not of liberty alone, too mean pretence, but what we more affect, honour, dominion, glory and renown, who have sustained one day in doubtful fight, and if one day, why not eternal days? What heaven's Lord had powerfulness to send against us from about his throne, and judge sufficient to subdue us to his will, but proves not so. Then fallible it seems, of future we may deem him, though till now omniscient thought. True is, less firmly armed, some disadvantage we endured in pain, till now not known, but known as soon condemned, since now we find this our imperial form incapable of mortal injury, imperishable, and through pierced with wound, soon closing, and by native vigour healed. Of evil then, so small as easy think the remedy, perhaps more valid arms, weapons more violent, than next we meet, they serve us better, us, and worse our foes, or equal what between us made the odds in nature none. If other hidden cause left them superior, or we can preserve unhurt our minds, and understanding sound, due search and consultation will disclose.
He sat, and in the assembly next up stood Nisroch, of principalities the prime. As one he stood escaped from the cruel fight, sore toiled, his riven arms to havoc hewn, and cloudy in aspect, thus answering spake.
Deliver from new lords, leader to free enjoyment of our night as gods, yet hard for gods, and to unequal work we find against unequal arms to fight in pain, against unpained, impassive from which evil. Ruin must needs ensue, for what avails valour or strength, though matchless, quelled with pain which all subdues, and makes remiss the hands of mightiest. Sense of pleasure we may well spare out of life perhaps, and not repine, but live content, which is the calmest life. But pain is perfect misery, the worst of evils, and excessive overturns all patience. He who therefore can invent with what more forceful we may offend our yet unwounded enemies, or arm ourselves with like defence, to me deserves no less than for deliverance what we owe.
Whereto with look composed Satan replied,
Not uninvented that, which thou a right belief so main to our success I bring. Which of us who beholds the bright surface of this inferious mould wherein we stand, this continent of spacious heaven, adorned with plant, fruit, flower ambrosial, gems and gold, whose eye so superfluously surveys these things, as not to mind from whence they grow deep underground, materials dark and crude, of spirituous and fiery spume, till touched with heaven's ray, and tempered they shoot forth so beauteous, opening to the ambient light. These in their dark nativities the deep shall yield us pregnant with infernal flame, which into hollow engines long and round, thick rammed, and at the other bore with touch of fire, deleted and infuriate, shall send forth from far, with thundering noise among our foes, such implements of mischief as shall dash to pieces, and overwhelm whatever stands averse. They shall fear we have disarmed the thunderer of his only dreaded bolt. Nor long shall be our labour, yet ere dawn, effect shall end our wish. Meanwhile, revive, abandon fear, to strength and counsel joined, think nothing hard, much less to be despaired.
He ended, and his words their dropping cheer enlightened, and their languished hope revived. The invention all admired, and each how he to be the inventor missed, so easy it seemed once found, which yet unfound would most have thought impossible. Yet haply of thy race in future days, if malice should abound, someone intent on mischief or inspired with devilish machination might devise like instrument to plague the sons of men for sin, on war and mutual slaughter bent. Forthwith from council to the work they flew, none arguing stood, innumerable hands were ready. In a moment up they turned wide the celestial soil, and saw beneath the originals of nature in their crude conception, Sulphurous and nitrous foam they found. They mingled, and with subtle art concocted and adjusted, they reduced the blackest grain, and into store conveyed. Part hidden veins digged up, nor hath this earth entrails unlike, of mineral and stone, whereof to found their engines and their balls of missive ruin, part inventive reed, provide pernicious with one touch to fire. So all ere day, ere spring, under conscious night, secret they finished and in order set. With silent circumspection unespied, now when fair morn orient in heaven appeared, uprose the victor angels, and to arms the matin trumpets sung. In arms they stood of golden panoply, refulgent hosts soon banded. Others from the dawning hills looked round, and scouts each coast-light arms scour each quarter to descry the distant foe, where lodged or whither fled, or if for fight in motion or in alt. Him soon they met under spread ensigns, moving nigh, in slow but firm battalion. Back with speediest sail, Zophiel of cherubim, the swiftest wing, came flying, and in mid-air aloud thus cried,
Army! Warriors! Army for fight, the foe at hand, whom fled we thought will save us long pursuit this day. Fear not his flight, so thick a cloud he comes, and settled in his face I see sad resolution and secure. Let each his adamantine coat gird well, and each fit well his helm, gripe fast his orbed shield, borne even or high, for this day will pour down, if I conjecture aught, no drizzling shower, but rattling storm of arrows barbed with fire, so warned he them aware themselves, and soon in order, quit of all impediment, instant without disturb they took alarm, and onward move embattled, when behold, not distant far, with heavy pace, the foe, approaching gross and huge, in hollow cube, training his devilish engineering, impaled on every side with shadowing squadrons deep to hide the fraud. At interview at both stood a while, but suddenly at head appeared Satan, and thus was heard, commanding loud,
Vanguard, to right and left the front unfold, that all may see who hate us, how we seek peace and composure, and with open breast stand ready to receive them, if they like our overture, and turn not back perverse. But that I doubt, however witness heaven, heaven witness that anon, while we discharge freely our part. Yea, you appointed stand, do as you have in charge, and briefly touch what we propound, and loud, that all may hear.
So scoffing in ambiguous words, the scarce had ended, when to right and left the front divided, and to either flank retired, which to our eyes discovered new and strange. A triple mounted row of pillars laid on wheels, for to like pillars most they seemed, or hollowed bodies made of oak and fir, with branches lopped in wood or mountain felled. Brass, iron, stony mould had not their mouths with wide orifice gaped on us wide, portending hollow truce. At each behind a seraph stood, and in his hand a reed stood waving tipped with fire. While we suspense collected stood with our thoughts amused. Not long, for sudden all at once their reeds put forth, and to a narrow vent applied with nicest touch. Immediate in a flame, but soon obscured with smoke, all heaven appeared. From those deep-throated engines belched, whose roar embowed with outrageous noise the air, and all her entrails tore, disgorging foul their devilish glut, chained thunderbolts and hail of iron globes, which on the victor host levelled, with such impetuous fury smote, that whom they hit, none on their feet might stand, though standing else as rocks, but down they fell by thousands. Angel on archangel rowled, the sooner for their arms, unarmed they might, have easily of spirits evaded swift by quick contradiction or remove, but now foul disposition followed, and forced route, nor served it to relax their serried files. What should they do? If on they rushed, repulse, repeated, and indecent overthrow doubled, would render them yet more despised, and to their foes a laughter, for in view stood ranked of seraphim another row in posture to disclose their second tide of thunder. Back defeated, to return they worse abhorred. Satan beheld their plight, and to his mates thus in derision called,
O friends, why come not on these victors proud? Erewhile they fierce were coming, and when we to entertain them fair with open front and breast, what could we more? propounded terms of composition, straight they changed their minds, flew off, and into strange vagaries fell, as they would dance. Yet for a dance they seemed somewhat extravagant and wild, perhaps for joy of offered peace. But I suppose if our proposals once again were heard, we should compel them to a quick result.
To whom thus Belial, in like gamesome mood,
Leader, the terms we sent were terms of weight, of hard contents, and full of force urged home, such as we might perceive amused them all, and stumbled many, who received them right. Her need from head to foot well understand, not understood. This gift they have besides, they show us when our foes walk not upright.
so they among themselves, in pleasant vein, stood scoffing, heightened in their thoughts beyond all doubt of victory. Eternal might, to match with their inventions, they presumed so easy, and of his thunder made a scorn. And all his host derided, while they stood a while in trouble, but they stood not long. Rage prompted them at length, and found their arms against such hellish mischief fit to oppose forthwith. Behold the excellence, the power, which God hath in his mighty angels placed. Their arms away they threw, and to the hills, for earth hath this variety from heaven, of pleasant situate in hill and dale. Light as the lightning glimpse they ran, they flew. From the foundations, loosening to and fro, they plucked the seated hills with all their load. Rocks, waters, woods, and by the shaggy tops uplifting, bore them in their hands. Amaze, be sure, and terror seized the rebel host, when coming towards them so dread they saw, the bottom of the mountains upward turned, till on those cursed engines triple row they saw them whelmed, and all their confidence under the weight of mountains buried deep, themselves invaded next, and on their heads main promontories flung, which in the air came shadowing, and oppressed whole legions armed. Their armour helped their harm, crushed in and bruised unto their substance pent, which wrought them pain implacable, and many a dolorous groan. Lots of struggling underneath, ere they could wind out of such prison. Those spirits of purest light, purest at first, now gross by sinning grown. The rest in imitation like armies betook them, and the neighbouring hills uptore. So hills in the air encountered hills, hurled to and fro with jaculation dire, that underground they fought in dismal shade. Infernal noise. War seemed a civil game to this uproar. Horrid confusion heaped upon confusion rose, and now all heaven hath gone to wrack, with ruin overspread. Had not the Almighty Father, where he sits, shrined in his sanctuary of heaven secure, consulting on the sum of things, foreseen this tumult, and permitted all, advised, that his great purpose he might so fulfill, to honour his anointed Son avenged upon his enemies, and to declare all power on him transferred, whence to his Son, the assessor of his throne, he thus began.
Effulgence of my glory, Son beloved, Son in whose face invisible is beheld visibly. What by deity I am, in whose hand, what by decree I do. Second omnipotence, 2 days are past, 2 days as we compute the days of heaven, since Michael and his powers went forth to tame these disobedient. Sore hath been their fight, as likely as was when 2 such foes met armed, for to themselves I left them, and thou knowest, equal in their creation they were formed, save what sin hath impaired, which yet hath wrought insensibly, for I suspend their doom, whence in perpetual fight they needs must last endless, and no solution will be found. War wearied hath performed what war can do, and to disordered rage let loose the reins, with mountains as with weapons armed, which makes wild work in heaven, and dangerous to the main. 2 days are therefore past, the 3rd is thine. For thee I have ordained it, and thus far have suffered, that the glory may be thine of ending this great war, since none but thou can end it. Into thee such virtue and grace immense I have transfused, that all may know in heaven and hell thy power above compare. And this perverse commotion govern thus, to manifest thee worthiest to be heir of all things, to be heir and to be king, by sacred unction thy deserved right. Go then, thou mightiest, in thy father's might. Ascend my chariot, guide the rapid wheels that shake heaven's basis. Bring forth all my war, my bow and thunder, my almighty arms. Gird on and sword upon thy puissant thigh. Pursue these sons of darkness, drive them out for all heaven's bounds into utter deep. There let them learn, as likes them, to despise God and Messiah, his anointed King.
He said, and on his son with rays direct shone full. He all his father full expressed, ineffably into his face received. And thus the filial Godhead answering spake.
O Father, O supreme of heavenly thrones, first, highest, holiest, best, thou always seekest to glorify thy Son, I always thee, as is most just. This is my glory account, my exultation and my whole delight, that thou in me well pleased declarest thy will fulfilled, which to fulfill is all my bliss, sceptre and power. Thy giving I assume, and gladly I shall reign, when in the end thou shalt be all in all, and I in thee forever, and in me all whom thou lovest, but whom thou hast I hate, and can put on thy terrors, as I put thy mildness on. Imagine of thee in all things, and shall soon armed with thy might rid heaven of these rebelled, to thy prepared ill mansion driven down, to chains of darkness and thy undying worm, that from thy obedience could revolt, whom to obey is happiness entire. Thou shalt thy saint unmixed, and from the impure fair separate, circling thy holy mount, and feigned hallelujahs to sing thee, hymns of highest praise, and I among them chief.
So said, he o'er his sceptre bowing, rose from the right hand of glory where he sat, and the third sacred morn began to shine, dawning through heaven. Forth rushed with whirlwind sound the chariot of paternal delight, flashing thick flames, wheel within wheel, undrawn, itself instinct with spirit, but convoyed by 4 cherubic shapes. 4 faces each had wondrous as with stars their bodies all, and wings were set with eyes the wheels of beryl, and careering fires between. O'er the heads a crystal firmament, whereon a sapphire throne inlaid with pure amber, and colours of the showery arch, high in celestial panoply all around of radiant Urim, work divinely wrought, ascended at his right hand, victory. Save eagle-winged, beside him hung his bow, and quiver with 3-bolted thunder stored. And from about him fierce effusion rolled, of smoke and bickering flame and sparkles dire. Attended with 10,000 saints, he onward came, far off his coming shone, and 20,000, I their number heard, chariots of God, half on each hand were seen. High on the wings of cherub rode sublime on the crystalline sky, in sapphire throned, illustrious far and wide, but by his own first seen. Them unexpected joy surprised, when the great ensign of Messiah blazed aloft by angels borne, his sign in heaven, under whose conduct Michael soon reduced his army, circumfused on either wing, under their head embodied all in one. Before him power divine his way prepared, at his command his uprooted hills retired, each to his place. They heard his voice and went obsequious, heaven his wonted face renewed, and with fresh flowers hill and valley smiled. This saw his hapless foes but stood abjured, and to rebellious flight rallied their powers insensate. Hope conceiving from despair in heavenly spirits could such perverseness dwell? But to convince the proud what signs avail, or wonders move the obdurate to relent? They hardened more by what might most reclaim, grieving to see his glory, at the sight took envy, and aspiring to his height stood grim-battered, fierce, by force or fraud, wheeling to prosper and at length prevail against God and Messiah, or to fall in universal ruin last. And now to final battle drew, disdaining flight or faint retreat, when the great Son of God to all his host on either hand thus spake.
Stand still in bright array, ye saints, here stand ye angels armed, this day from battle rest. Faithful has you been your warfare, and of God accepted, fearless in his righteous cause, and as ye have received, so have you done, invincible. But of this cursed crew the punishment to other hand belongs. Vengeance is his, or whose he sole appoints. Number to these days' work is not ordained, nor multitude. Stand alone and behold God's indignation on these godless poured by me. Not you, but me they have despised, yet envied. Against me is all their rage, because the Father, to whom the heavens supreme, kingdom and power and glory appertains, hath honoured me according to his will. Therefore to me their doom he hath assigned, that they may have their wish, to try with me in battle, which the stronger proves. They all, or I alone against them, since by strength they measure all. Of other excellence not emules, nor care whom them excels, nor others strife with whom do I vouchsafe.
So spake the Son, and into terror changed his countenance, too severe to be beheld, and full of wrath bent on his enemies. At once the four spread out their starry wings with dreadful shade contagious, and the orbs of his fierce chariot rolled as with the sound of torrent floods or of a numerous host. He on his impious foes right onward drove, gloomy as night. Under his burning wheels the steadfast Empyreans shook throughout, all but the throne itself of God. Full soon among them he arrived, in his right hand grasping 10,000 thunders, which he sent before him, such as their souls in fixed plagues. They astonished, all resistance lost, all courage. Down their idle weapons dropped, o'er shields and helmed head he rode, of thrones and mighty seraphim prostrate, that wished the mountains now might be again thrown on them as a shelter from his ire. Nor less on either side tempestuous fell his arrows, from the fourfold visage fall, distinct with eyes, and from the living wheels distinct alike with multitude of eyes. One spirit in them ruled, and every eye gladder lightning, and shot forth pernicious fire among the accursed that withered in all their strength, and of their wonted vigour left them drained, exhausted, spiritless, afflicted, fallen. Yet half his strength he put not forth, but checked his thunder in mighty oil, for he meant not to destroy, but root them out of heaven. The overthrown he raised, and as a herd of goats or timorous flock together thronged, drove them before him thunderstruck, pursued with terrors and with furies to the bounds and crystal wall of heaven, which opening wide, rolled inward, and a spacious gap disclosed into the wasteful deep. The monstrous sight shook them with horror backward, but far worse urged them behind. Headlong themselves they threw down from the verge of heaven. Eternal wrath burnt after them into the bottomless pit. Hell heard the unsufferable noise. Hell saw heaven ruining from heaven, and would have fled affrighted. But strict fate had cast too deep her dark foundations, and too fast bound. 9 days they fell. Confounded chaos roared, and felt tenfold confusion in their fall through his wide anarchy. So huge a rout encumbered him with ruin. Hell at last, yawning, received them whole, and on them closed. Hell, their fit habitation, fraught with fire unquenchable, the house of woe and pain. Disburdened heaven rejoiced, and soon repaired her mural breach, returning whence it rolled. Sole victor from the expulsion of his foes, Messiah his triumphal chariot turned. To meet him, all his saints who silent stood eyewitness of this almighty act with jubilee advanced. And as they went, shaded with branching palm, each order bright sung triumph, and hymn sung victorious King, Son, heir, and Lord, to him dominion given, worthiest to reign. He celebrated, rode triumphant throughout mid-heaven, into the courts and temple of his mighty Father throned on high, who into glory him received, where now he sits at the right hand of bliss.
Thus measuring things in heaven by things on earth at thy request, and that thou mayst beware by what is past, to thee I have revealed what might have else to human race been hid. The discord which befell, and war in heaven among the angelic powers, and the deep fall of those too high aspiring, who rebelled with Satan, he who envies now thy state, who now is plotting how he may seduce thee also from disobedience, that with him bereaved of happiness thou mayst partake his punishment, eternal misery, which would be all his solace and revenge, as a despite done against the Most High, thee wants to gain companion of his woe. Listen not to his temptations, warn thy weaker, let it profit thee to have heard by terrible example the reward of disobedience. Firm they might have stood, yet fell. Remember and fear to transgress.
Is that the end?
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thanks for bringing us back on track a bit more. We're only
Oh,
half
did
an hour
we?
behind
Oh,
now.
so
That's
did
brilliant.
we shave off some minutes?
You did. You had a good time. Good time. Good.